I think we may start. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the semifinals of the tournament. Today is the 14th of December, and we will have the very first match of our semifinals. This is the match between Team 3 and versus EurAsia. And the debate topic for this round is patent rights should be waived for easy production of COVID-19 vaccines. We should discuss about this topic, and the first thing I will do is to see which one will have the proposition and composition. I will share my screen. Yeah. Yes, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Great, thank you. I will start drawing the position. Yes. So Team EurAsia, you have the composition, and therefore Team 3, you have the proposition. Write it down in the chat as well, so everyone is clear about this. Before we go for 5 minutes of preparation, is there any questions regarding anything else? Yep, all clear, great. You may turn off your camera or turn on your camera, but you have 5 minutes of preparation and it starts now. Thank you. You have 1 minute remaining. Yes, and your time for preparation is up. I will stop sharing the slides and start. So I would like to invite Team Pro. Can you please take the floor? You have 4 minutes for your opening speech. Thank you.
Good evening. Before I start, am I audible and visible? Yes. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Isabel Lettner, and me and my colleagues, Momchil Bonef and Orkun Akendis, will be arguing in favor of waiving patent rights for the easy production of COVID-19 vaccines. The main argument for this stance are as following. First, the protection of public health. Second, the inefficiency of patents during an emergency situation. And third, a previous solution to a past crisis. The fallout of this contemporary crisis has been felt by everyone. However, low-income nations did and still do not have the privilege of adequately and promptly protecting their citizens from the COVID-19 virus, as they do not have the right to manufacture COVID-19 vaccines. Accordingly, on the 2nd of October 2020, India and South Africa submitted a proposal to the TRIPS Council asking for patents to be waived on vaccines and COVID-19 technologies. This proposal was the result of a development of vaccines which utilize existing patented advances, such as the mRNA version of the COVID-19 vaccine. Additionally, India and South Africa made reference to an event earlier in the pandemic where the US had suffered N95 respiratory shortage, leading to Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear calling on manufacturers to lift patents. This illustrates that the protection of public health is limited to patent rights, constricting low-income nations in their production, even though, according to Dr. John Nkangzon, the head of the African Center for Disease Control and Prevention, there are currently 6 institutions across Africa which have the capacity of manufacturing vaccines. Logically, any opportunity to beat this virus should be tackled head-on. Due to new deadly variants appearing, the threat to public health only becomes more prominent. Therefore, the efficacy of vaccines will be undermined, and low-income nations will only suffer more with increased death rates. Furthermore, the reason behind patent protection is to prohibit the invention being commercially made and distributed without the patent's owner consent. However, according to a Doctors Without Borders report, patents regarding vaccine development and manufacturing have been increasingly problematic over the past 15 years as they slow down development whilst deterring other manufacturers. Should it not be a medical duty to resolve the current emergency situation by an urgent intervention to prevent the worsening of the situation? Seemingly, the wave of patents to immunize as many global citizens as possible? Historically, this is not impossible. For instance, in 1955, the polio vaccine was announced by Jonas Salk. After a placebo-controlled clinical trial involving 1.6 million children proved successful, Jonas Salk declared the vaccine not patented. Accordingly, the global distribution was maximized, drastically contributing to a decrease in polio infections. Ladies and gentlemen, it is for these reasons that we believe the commercial interests need to be put aside when the lives of billions are at stake during life-threatening pandemic. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And now I would give the floor to Team Khan, EurAsia. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you for your statement for the pro team. Good evening, honorable juries, respected organizers, and fellow competitors. Today, I'm honored to be given the opportunity to share some light on Team EurAsia's opposing view on the topic of whether or not patent rights should be waived for easy production of COVID-19 vaccines. In a time where the world is fighting against COVID-19 for almost 2 years now, the need for vaccine accessibility is more important than ever. That said, we believe that waiving the patent rights of COVID-19 vaccines is not a sustainable path and not the right decisions at all. The rationale behind the patents is the intention to provide innovation and offer the incentive for people to study new technology. The removal of patent protection is not a suitable means of increasing the global supply of vaccines. Production and distribution of vaccines will not speed up, and it could entail health risks from vaccines that are not expertly manufactured. The waiver cannot solve non-intellectual property problems like shortage in raw materials, insufficient production capacity worldwide to timely produce the required vaccines, and lack of a workforce trained in the highly complex manufacturing processes used in various COVID-19 vaccines. While some may argue that patents create monopolies, which could in turn create price increases, Article 31 of the WTO TRIPS agreement already contains sufficient flexibilities to prevent negative effects of patents. The article allows WTO member states to provide for compulsory licenses for patents under certain circumstances. Member states are free to implement this option in their national laws in such a way that in case of unjustified license refusal by patentees, production permits can be issued expeditiously. Compulsory licensing is legal under international law, but only in limited instances. It allows local companies to produce generic versions of patented medicines, such as COVID-19 vaccines, in desperate times. However, as we have observed in India and Brazil and other nations, we have observed abuse of this policy and the allowance of drug makers to produce just about any generic drug without any urgent reason at all and without the patent's owner's permission. Although quicker, cheaper manufactured COVID-19 vaccines could prove to be less efficient and could actually hinder the distribution of well-manufactured vaccines. The development of new vaccines, that is from the provision of the technological basis to safety studies and a market authorization, is tremendously multifaceted. Nevertheless, throughout the development, production and distribution of vaccines against COVID-19, cooperation has reached a very high level despite fierce competition in the biopharmaceutical sector. Intellectual property rights and particularly patents are normally the basis for such a cooperation. They provide assurance that contracts will be fulfilled, and a waiver of these rights may have detrimental consequences for the willingness to cooperate and may lead to decreased distribution of COVID-19 vaccines. Biopharmaceutical research is risky and expensive. For every 5,000 molecules developed in the lab, only one successfully advances through lab testing and receives regulatory approval. After accounting for all these failures, it costs almost $3 billion on average to bring a single medicine to pharmacy shelves. Biotech industries only take this risk because of strong patent protections. Not surprisingly, nations with strong patent law produce higher volumes of new treatments. Instead of waiving patent rights for COVID-19 vaccines and leaving the door open for future arbitrary government-mandated waivers for intellectual property rights, countries already producing a considerable amount of the vaccine should instead cooperate and invest in major manufacturing expansion. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'd like to give the floor for Pro Team. You may proceed with your first argument.
Okay, thank you. So the first thing that Team 3 would like to point out is how the Khan team discussed the issue of the fake vaccines being developed. So in an earlier point, they said that there's a certain skill required in the workforce for the vaccines to be produced. However, it's not like people with that workforce skill are just going to be making those vaccines. To make a fake vaccine or a faulty vaccine, that can somehow pass all the legislation and the requirements that are necessary for the production of a vaccine to be introduced to the market as well, they would need to have that proper skill. So that argument doesn't make quite a lot of sense, and it kind of contradicts their own points. Next to that, the Khan team has stated that there are certain protections with patents, and they're worried about that being lifted and causing more governments to lift patents for their own benefit. However, despite saying that they disagree with it, previously they stated that countries can already use compulsory patents. So again, there's another contradiction in their argument. At one moment it's bad, the other moment is, but it is available and we promote it. So next to that, they discussed the issue in certain countries like India and whatnot, where faulty products are often introduced into the market. It is indeed a big issue that needs to be addressed. However, it needs to also be stated that about 9.9% of the population in India has gotten vaccinated yet. In Afghanistan, for instance, another country with the same issue, that number is 1.15%. Clearly, they need to have a higher amounts of production available to the countries, which some countries do have the option for, but can't do due to patent issues. Take, for instance, South Africa, who is actively trying to get the patents or be able to produce the vaccines, which they have the resources for, which they have the workforce for. They can do so, but are simply blocked by the patent. The patent is not only causing issues in the manufacturing and the dispersal of the vaccines, the development itself is also being hindered, as previously stated by my colleague Isabel. The patents are causing issues, and especially in the current situation, we can't waste any more time on this, and to go through the process of a compulsory patent takes too much time that we simply do not have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Team Khan, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for your arguments. First of all, I would like to point out that we did not mention anything about fake vaccines. I will quote the introduction of my teammate that states, just about any generic drug without any urgent reason at all. So meaning abuse of manufacturing of generic vaccines. We did not say anything about fake vaccines, just for clarity. And my next point I wanted to mention is that I believe that we have heard very important arguments from the opposing team about human rights and the right to health, which I fully agree with, and I believe I speak for my team as well. However, I would like to redirect the debate to the fact that we are talking about commercial law, specifically the intellectual property rights of COVID-19 vaccine manufacturers, specifically patent law. You mentioned that there are laboratories ready to manufacture COVID vaccines, but unfortunately, you are ignoring the fact that there are more variables than just manufacturers that are ready to produce. There are issues of raw materials that are unavailable. There are issues of people that have enough technical knowledge and expertise to develop the vaccine at all. In the introduction, it was also mentioned that low-income countries do not have the right to manufacture. However, no one is stopping low-middle income countries to produce their own vaccine, as long as it is not inherently copying anything from patent-protected vaccine manufacturing technicalities. Vaccines, moreover, are not comparable to single-use protective gear like face masks, because this has already existed before the pandemic. Waiving patent protection discourages cutting-edge investments, which in turn produce breakthrough treatments just like the COVID-19 vaccine. For other diseases, you have mentioned polio, but weakening these protections would be anti-patient and counterproductive. It is empty symbolism. Patents provide an incentive for companies to embark on the costly and time-consuming research and development of new breakthrough drugs and vaccines. Waiving IP rights will not solve major obstacles hindering vaccine availability around the world, and is mostly a form of symbolism. We can argue about waiving the patent rights the whole night, but of course, the most important thing here is to find a solution with regard to patent law that would make vaccine distribution more equitable, more accessible to low or middle income countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, EurAsia. Now I would like to invite Team 3. You may proceed with your second argument.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's start off with, it seems that the con team wishes to make this a debate about economics and says that morals essentially, or the argument that we have, don't apply. However, it needs to be said and made very clear, every law is based on morals, be they criminal, be they economic, any of them discuss morals and especially health. Because if people are unhealthy, how are they going to be able to follow the law if they're dead? That's the current situation. It's grim, it's not happy to say, but it is the way that it is. The pro team would like to make a correction, as the con team has stated. They indeed said generic vaccines. The pro team apologizes, however, the point still stands. It is not still the introduction of generic vaccines that would supplement the COVID vaccine would still have to pass certain regulation that would have essentially protected. So the whole patent protecting faulty products isn't necessarily the case. Next to that, the con team stated the shortage in products which are required for manufacturing, as well as, again, the workforce. But as previously stated, countries like South Africa are ready. In the appeal that they made to the World Health Organization, or the UN in general, was that they can do it, but they are simply blocked by the patent. So that was, again, a wrong statement from them. Another thing that needs to be noted is that the money or the funding for these companies that produce the vaccines, we can talk about the economic incentive for a company, but most of the money for these vaccines come from governments. They are being funded. They don't necessarily get all the money by themselves. So to then proceed to take that money and just look at the company and not the people who decide about the government, whose government is supposed to work for them, to just ignore them in that sense, is kind of ridiculous. It doesn't make sense, and it goes against standard morals. Thank you.
Thank you. Team EurAsia, you have your floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you once again to the pro team for their insightful remarks on the topic. It's very evident to anyone who is listening to this debate that the pro team, as they are aware, are focusing solely on what they've referred to as basic morals and what they have somehow determined as being a universal moral standard that we must all apply to each and every situation, because they are more than aware that there is a legal framework for patent waivers in cases of emergency. This can be easily found in the TRIPS agreement. There is a clear framework. There are certain hurdles that must be met, certain criteria that must be met for a patent waiver to be applied in the case of an emergency. And they are very clearly more than aware that this is not the case currently. If such a case, if this framework were to be met currently, South Africa and India would be capable of applying for this waiver. South Africa and India are not capable of manufacturing these vaccines. And to further illustrate this point, it is very clear that the pro team has cherry-picked two singular examples from a global scale that best suit their narrative that they are trying to present in this argument. They are more than aware, as we all are, that there are other hurdles to vaccine manufacturing that extend beyond the limits of a patent protection. They are more than aware that there are raw material issues, that there are capability issues globally, and cherry picking a few singular countries that illustrate what narrative they are trying to present here, which is yet again based largely on whatever moral grandstanding they're attempting to do here, instead of the legal basis, which is available once again to be read. And if such the legal basis were to be met for a TRIPS waiver to be applied, it would be applied, and it has not been. They are aware of this, and we are aware of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Team Bro, you may have the floor for your last argument. Thank you.
Okay. My counter colleagues have on multiple occasions talked about the already existing flexibilities under the TRIPS agreement, and more specifically Article 31. However, this was already addressed by India and Africa in their letter to the LTO. India and Africa have stated that although the flexibilities are useful, they are insufficient, as in the current situation, time is of the essence, and the legislature under Article 31 is on a case-by-case basis, meaning that every patent has to be passed in order to be compulsory licensed later on. Furthermore, countries like the European Union and the United States, who have been predominantly against the waiver of the vaccines, have on multiple occasions condemned countries such as India and Africa for using that article of the TRIPS agreement, for using Article 31 and 31 bis. For example, in their IP Enforcement Report 2020, the European Union condemned India and Africa for their usage and for their improvement of compulsory licensing laws in their national legislation. Furthermore, the United States, in their Trade Representative Report Special 301, have done the same thing as the European Union. Furthermore, I would like to tackle another issue my counter-colleagues have presented. They have stated that there is already a sense of international collaboration among companies. However, up to date, not a single company has committed to the voluntary COVID-19 technology access pool of the WHO. And thus, I cannot really see how any sort of collaboration can be existent, considering that they have not signed their pledges under the COVID-19 technology access pool, which the WHO has provided. I believe that I have addressed the concerns my opponents have raised, and yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Team EurAsia, you have the floor.
Thank you again, and thank you to the opposing team for their views. Once again, they've made some very valuable points. I do want to point out firstly about the COVID technology access pool that they mentioned in their previous rebuttal. As they are aware, in order to partake in the pool that they mentioned, it's essentially waiving patent rights, and the collaboration only provides very limited compensation to the holders of, let's say, COVID-19 vaccine patents, for example. This just highlights the fact that there needs to be incentive for companies. They've inadvertently made the point for us. Limited incentive that is previously, determined prior to the product, is not an effective way to protect intellectual property rights. It is not an effective way to ensure that innovation continues. And instead of waiving patent rights for COVID-19 vaccines and placing the likelihood on further potential weakening of intellectual property rights, there are much better options available. In order for us to continue to innovate, in order for biopharmaceutical companies to continue to produce medicines, to continue to produce vaccines, their intellectual property rights are absolutely paramount to the existence of our society as a whole. If we are to begin to weaken intellectual property rights, we're essentially sending a clear signal that the incentivization has been removed from the research and development, and we're instead heading in a direction in which there is no incentive for biopharmaceutical companies to produce vaccines and do research and development. Where there is no incentive, there will be no results, and where there will be no results, there will be lives lost. If they are so concerned about human rights and the right to life, this would be a very pertinent consideration for the opposing team. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we will proceed with the conclusion. Each team will have 2 minutes, and Team Pro, you may have the floor first. Thank you.
My colleague has once again talked about the incentive for companies to develop those vaccines and medicine. However, we have to understand once again that most of the funding provided for the vaccines came from the governments and not from the private sector. Furthermore, the whole mRNA research was done on the national level and not on the private level as well. But furthermore, the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic can be seen worldwide. However, as established throughout the course of this debate, even now developing nations are being denied the opportunity to adequately protect their citizens from the COVID-19 virus, as they do not have the right to manufacture the COVID-19 vaccines. Similarly, according to the head of the African Center for Disease Control and Prevention, there are 6 institutions across Africa which have the capacity to manufacture the COVID vaccines, but are unable to do so due to the patents in place. Limiting the global capacity to produce vaccines in the context of a global pandemic, including through maintaining intellectual property rights and technologies that were developed mostly thanks to public funding, is a major moral failure from a global health perspective. Additionally, rather than focusing on the perceived loss big pharma will suffer, should we not be more concerned about how our failure to take prompt action will prolong this pandemic, giving time for deadly variants to appear and consequently accentuating the suffering of people all around the world? Furthermore, historically, we have seen how effective vaccines without patents can be. For instance, the polio vaccine was never patented, due to which global distribution and production of the vaccine were maximized, which effectively led to the eradication of polio from the face of the earth. A relevant quote, which illustrates the necessity of waiving the patents associated with the current COVID vaccine, is found from Mara Botenga, a member of the European Parliament. Variants show how no one is safe until everybody is safe. We need more vaccines quickly. Lifting patents and transferring technology are absolutely key to ramping up vaccine production. Private profits should never stand in the way of public health. It is for these reasons that my colleagues and I believe that patent rights associated with the COVID-19 vaccines should be waived. Thank you.
Thank you very much. EurAsia, you may have the floor for your conclusion.
On behalf of Team EurAsia, I would like to thank you all once again for the opportunity to argue on the topic concerning the waiver of patents for COVID-19 vaccines. The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted our individual lives beyond what we could ever imagine. Of course, from a humanitarian perspective, it's very easy to say, yes, patent rights should be waived for easy production and easier access of COVID-19 vaccines for all. However, we must ask ourselves, is it fair to use a company's private property for the public good, even in a time of crisis? I must recall Article 31 of the TRIPS Agreement, which allows the WTO members to provide for compulsory licenses for patents, including the use by the government or third parties authorized by the government. Such licenses can be granted by the respective authorities based on national laws. Therefore, the TRIPS agreement contains sufficient flexibilities to prevent negative effects of patents. To reinstate, waiving IP rights will not solve the major obstacles hindering the vaccine availability around the world and is at most a form of empty symbolism. IP waivers will not necessarily accelerate vaccine manufacturing because materials are in short supply and it can take several years to build up capacity from scratch. Patents provide an incentive for companies to embark on the costly and time-consuming research and development of new breakthrough drugs and vaccines. The removal of patent protection is not and will never be a suitable means of increasing the global supply of vaccines. So, what is then the solution? We should invest in major manufacturing investment for geographically distributed vaccine manufacturing. We should address the issues of vaccine hoarding or the massive lack of manufacturing capacity. Arguing on whether patent rights should be waived is moot and is distracting us from the more important quest of equitable vaccine distribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and that concludes our session for the first match of the semifinals. Very well done to both teams, and congratulations. We have Ms. Novak in our match currently, and I would like to invite you to deliver some feedback to both teams. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and congratulations from me. I will be pretty brief because you will receive also my feedback on written forms. I have to say that it was a pleasure to become a judge of this debate, and that's not the first debate I've been judging. And I have to say, considering also my previous experiences, that the level of this debate was really, really high, especially in terms of your preparation. So kudos to both of the teams. You were very well prepared, and this match was quite tight. So also for me as a judge, it's going to be quite difficult evaluation of each of the criteria to choose the winner. Very good structure on both sides from the beginning till the end. That's something that I want to compliment as well. Composure, the way you were addressing each other, well done. Language, very good as well. What I was missing a little bit though was maybe the variety of the arguments that would also touch a little bit more upon the pathos, and also maybe focusing more on something that you really want to stick to, instead of a little bit speeding up and covering too much. Maybe focusing more on developing some arguments to make them more vocal, more, let's say, as an audience, to really give me some time to process them, to understand them and go through them. Not only, I mean, it was interesting. I was taking notes also, to be honest. Like, you were very well prepared, and it was really also an informative debate for me, as not someone who's coming from a patent background, more from the commercial background. But at the same time, I would appreciate maybe if you would kind of try to convince me more. You convinced each other, so that was a great debate. And I also have to compliment you on the way you were responding to the arguments. That was excellent, and also showed how both of the teams were well prepared. You listened and you addressed each other's arguments. So that's really excellent, and that's high level of the preparation and the debate skills presented on both sides. As someone from outside, maybe that would be something like this, a variety of argument, maybe a bit more of pathos there sometimes could work in your favor. But besides that, that's from me. I don't want to take more time, as the other debate, I think, is starting soon, has already started. Congratulations to both of the teams. Yeah, from me, it was a pleasure.
Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Novak, for your time. The result will be delivered by the end of this week, so you will receive it via email and also on Blackboard, so keep an eye. Thank you, everyone, and have a very nice evening.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
For hosting.